Nice to see you here on this wintry evening. Very Melbourne tonight, isn't it? Sort of doesn't quite know which way to go. When we speak about anxiety, what part of the body do you immediately refer to? Stomach, heart, chest, mind. Right, so we've had the full range in 4 responses. Would the real anxiety please stand up? So why do we point to all these different arenas? If I were to ask you, what part of the body do you think with? You'd have no hesitation whatsoever. What part of the body do you feel with? You'd probably point towards your heart. When it comes to anxiousness, we're all over the place, literally and figuratively. And that is because there are certain aspects of emotion that are generalized throughout the body. Remembering that there is a sequence. Everything begins with the mind. Emotions begin with the mind. Body functions begin with the mind. So somewhere along the line, we have to conclude that the mind holds the key to everything. And if I say to you, the mind holds the key, how do you think that might relate to the word anxiousness? It can unlock it. Any other thoughts? Control. Transform. Generates. So in other words, as we've always been suggesting, interpretation holds the key. But sometimes the capacity to reinterpret in the moment becomes problematic, either because we're panic-driven in the moment, it's overwhelming in the moment. In other words, we can't gain control through the mind because the mind is out of control. And therefore, under those circumstances, what we need to do is momentarily create a vacuum. We have to turn everything off. So when we say create inner space, when we say it's important to elicit the relaxation response, when we say that we need to momentarily become mindful about something else, what we're saying is we want to give in that moment a non-mind, non-heart airing out. Anxiousness can only operate during the time of interpretation. If you don't interpret it negatively, whatever the it is, the surrounding stimuli, the circumstances, the situational setting, then under those circumstances, you won't necessarily have the feeling. In other words, it's got to be a matter of interpretation. So in other lectures, I've taught you, or perhaps shared with you, an approach to reframe and reinterpret. In this series, we're not talking as much about reinterpretation. We're talking about creating the space where reinterpretation in the moment is just too difficult. Okay? So in a sense, we're talking about an emergency SOS response. It'll hold good for a while. You can keep a vacuum going for a while. However, at some point, you'll have to move back to problem solving, reframing, and thereby changing your emotions, and if you practice this consistently, a change in emotional disposition. All right, so that's giving a sense between why do we sometimes talk in terms of the importance of changing your mind, literally speaking, because changing your mind means changing the grooves of the brain. The physiological aspect is the electrostatics and the neurotransmissions of the brain, and you can change that. And at other times, we're not talking about that at all. We're talking about refocusing, changing our area of focus. Understand the distinction? And both are tools to be utilized as you see fit at whatever times you find your wisdom is directing you to. There is a left side to this diagram, turning to the front page diagram, and a right side. The right side of the diagram tends to be outward flow. Chochmah, Chesed, Netzach are sefirot that move outwards. Whereas Bina, Gevura, and Hod are sefirot, or potential energies of the body that flow inwards. Just intuitively, which side dominates in a state of worry and anxiousness? Intuitively. Right? Left? If I say to you, I'm feeling very worried and anxious, do you think this posture is more reflective or that posture is more reflective? Okay, that's the left side. And therefore, what we need to do is, in terms of Kabbalistic understanding of the Sefirot, we need to balance the left side with more of the right side. Just keep that in mind. We'll come back to it towards the end of the session. So, if you look at point 2, let's look at a case situation. You're late for a specialist doctor's appointment and caught in heavy traffic and therefore likely to miss it. You don't have to write this, but at least think it and then share with me. What is a single word to identify your feelings? Right? You're rushing to this appointment, traffic is heavy, and there is a very good chance you'll miss this appointment. Ben? Panic. Agitation. Frustration. Disappointment. Tell me, are any of these words positive? No. Is there anyone in this room who might be able to respond positively or advise us how might there be a positive response in this set of circumstances? Very, very good. And then the very, very empathetic nurse says, bad luck, you've missed this appointment, in 3 months you can have another one.
You can ask what's good about this.
You can ask what's good about this and probably get no good answer.
Try to solve the problem.
Try to solve the problem. Reframe it. All these are very good. The point being that in the very moment, you may not be having this nice, cool, cerebral discussion that we're having, which is highly analytical while you're sitting comfortably in a chair listening to me. In fact, it's very unlikely that you'll be in your current state of mind or heart. The heart will be pumping, the head will be all over the place, and the traffic constantly causes you to have another focus there. All you can do under those circumstances is probably do what I'm going to advise you to do this session, is to create, not even surrender, just time out. Whatever that word means, time out. How to create a vacuum in the moment and address the issues later on again.
So what do? You make a U-turn and go back?
No, you wait another 15 minutes till we get to the answer. Okay? Now, I want you to really situationally put yourself in that setting. You're in the car or in public transport, whatever might be the case, and you are definitely late for an appointment that you have spent a long time waiting for because it's pretty hard to get to this doctor, etc. And looks like it's not going to happen. What part of your body will give you signals? I want you to really put yourself there. Almost what we said right at the beginning. And every one of us in this room has our characteristic indicator. And very often, if you're tuned into your body, understanding and recognizing that indicator can save you a lot of wear and tear on your body. Because before you even have the consciousness of emotional negativity, the body's already telling you about it. So you might recognize your hand in a fist. You might recognize your eyes going into a squint. You might recognize all the things that you've said, something rising from the tummy to the chest or vice versa, etc. So anxiousness has its indicators, and everyone in this room has his or her signature indicator. And if you can become familiar with that indicator, you can actually begin to do a lot of good for yourself before the harm actually begins. That's very, very important, to be able to recognize within yourself. Now, if we had time, what we'd probably do is have a nice choice of games where I'd ask each of you to be rather nasty to each other in groups of pairs, and you'd start to recognize what parts of the body are responding. Because even in jest, the narrative creates some symptoms. We're not going to do that. I'm not sure how well you know each other, and some of you might actually mean it, so let's see. What's the common denominator behind all feelings of anxiousness? What is the common denominator behind all anxiousness, feelings, or worry, or concern?
Not having control.
Again?
Not having control.
Loss of control, fear, you rattle, unease, uncertainty, lack. I would tend to favor that the underlying word, underlying all of yours, is what, sorry, didn't get your name in the back? Marcel said, fear. There's something you're afraid of. So let's now be a little bit more cerebral because we got the time to do so. What are you afraid of in terms of this situation, the doctor situation? What are you afraid of?
Health.
Your health? In other words, your health won't be attended to, and so what is the fear there?
It could get worse.
It could get worse, and what's the fear there? You could die.
I have a terrible fear of not freeways. I can't drive, so I just avoid. I do not drive because I've never learned to cope with that fear.
Okay, so next time I'll put the example of driving on highways, but right now I'm talking about doctor's appointments, okay? That part of it, all right? Your issue, we'll discuss later. Okay, yes.
From another point of view, if you're running late for a dentist appointment, the fear would be that he's actually going to inflict more pain on you because of the fact that you're running late as well.
So you get a double dose of pain. His wrath as well as the pain of the... Okay. Fear is the common denominator. You always can ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? Why is it important to ask that? Because we always exaggerate our fears. And when you exaggerate fears, the pain of the fear becomes that much more so. Remember when I shared with you that being afraid of pain causes the pain to be even stronger? Did I share it with this group? Do you recall? The example of you being the wise parent and your child is at the age of getting its inoculations or vaccinations. So what do? You sit your child down and explain to the child with great sagacity and wisdom the importance of the vaccination. But the child doesn't understand such a big word, so what do? You say to the child, the doctor is going to have in his needle inside very good things. And when that needle goes into your skin, all those good things are going to come into your body, and that way all those nasty germs won't be able to make you sick. And of course, because you are so wise, your child is very wise. And so the child nods sagaciously back at you. And you say to yourself, what a machaya, what a wonderful child I've got. And then you take the child to the doctor. And the doctor brings out the needle. And geschrei, the loudest screaming and yelling that you ever heard from your child. And you ask yourself, whatever happened to my very wise tutorial that I gave to my child who was so obedient? And the short answer is that had you not sat your child down and not given that tutorial, not told the child anything, but at the operative moment when the doctor produces the needle, you would avert the child's eyes, there still would have been a little bit of a yelp, but nothing as dramatic as the previous example. Why? Because when you prepare a person for pain, they feel the same pain that much more acutely. You create fear in the child even while the child is nodding, and therefore the expectation of the pain becomes exaggerated in the moment. Fear of pain is what causes the pain. Fear underlies anxiousness. And when there's fear, we allow the imagination to roam, and we always move to the nth degree. Exaggerated emotions. We always fear eventually the worst, even though it's totally unreasonable. So the common denominator behind really all negative feelings, but certainly the one of anxiousness and worry, is fear. So if at that moment you can ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? You can get a much more accurate barometer reading. Is it likely that you will die because you'll not receive the appointment? Very unlikely, in 99.9% of all instances. What will be the worst case scenario? You'll be left in a state of uncertainty because we crave certainty. A professional's word becomes to us certain, and that certainty gives us comfort. So you'll be in a state of uncertainty. A lot of people fear uncertainty. There's your other fear. But what would be the worst case situation? Why would you even become anxious in the situation that I've raised? Is there any rational reason to become worried and upset, etc.? Or are we conditioned that when we have doctor's appointments, something sacrosanct has taken place and something quite beyond logic means that we have to comply to that time frame? It's not logical at all. There's nothing to be afraid of, and there's nothing to worry about. And yet we would all get that sense of anxiousness. So just for a moment, think to yourself of circumstances that have risen recently in your life where you have felt anxiousness and worry. And now, in the comfort of your space now, was it really reasonable to be so upset by it? Sometimes yes, nearly always no. But do we learn from it? Let's have a look. The truth is, you and I are normal by worrying, although we want to learn how to lessen it. In fact, the bumper sticker, "Normal people worry me," is a very, very good one. So I want you to check whether you are inherently a worrier. Look at numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and see if you find yourself somewhere there. Do I worry about the many things every day? Do I seem to make problems larger, not smaller? Do I worry about things that people about me aren't worried about? Do I worry even during happy times? Do I find I can't stop worrying even though I try? When one worry is solved, do I immediately focus on another? Spend a little time asking yourself if any of those apply to you. If all 6 apply to you, that's not good. You can be excused for having a couple of those, but not the majority. And it all comes down to fear. Many people, when life is going well for them, they sabotage themselves by creating a problem for themselves. What shall I worry about now? Anyone in this room fit that bill? That's a rhetorical question. You can answer that to yourself. Why do they do that? There's lots of Other reasons unrelated to here: self-esteem, guilt, they don't feel they deserve a good life, all sorts of other issues to deal with myself as a person. Okay, so let's look now at solutions. Drugs is a solution. People whose stress level, the result of anxiousness and worry, reaches a certain point that subjectively in that person causes chemical changes to the brain, which causes them to have loss of control about their worry. Depression is an example of that. Clinical depression need chemical means to be able to undo it, because you have to your body committed a chemical act of pain and hurt, and therefore only chemistry can undo it. Talk therapy will not undo it if it's reached that particular point. A lot of people, unfortunately, again, I'll use the example of depression, although we will discuss it another time more specifically, don't wish to take chemical means of correcting themselves because they fear the notion of chemicals, without realizing that you, through your worry, through your anxiousness, are actually chemically changing your brain, chemically changing the results. You practice chemistry as much as the pill that's prescribed for you. No less, no more. People don't recognize that. Of course, in our session here, what we're trying to do, and we'll get to it, is to learn techniques of preventing us reaching a stage where there is that degree of change of chemistry that we need chemical means to undo it. What the chemical means to undo it is all about is to create a level playing field. We have lost the capacity of level playing field when we're in clinical depression, for example. The problem, of course, is that they have side effects. There's no exactitude, and it becomes sometimes a long-term process, sometimes many, many, many months, if not initial years, before you can actually get back to yourself, etc. So drugs is, of course, a mechanism of last resort in this respect. There are plants and minerals that assist with your worry warts. As you see written there, they say the root of a plant called kava, the use of more calcium and magnesium and 5-HTP and others mechanisms might provide that kind of suitable substitute. If you tend to be a worrier, don't use stimulants. Try to do without caffeine. Certainly eliminate sugar. Try not to watch all the latest newscasts and the newsreels and the up-to-date news, all of which are produced in a very calculated way to instill fear in you, because the producers of the news know full well that their ratings will go up if you're glued to the screen. And the best way to glue you to the screen is to make you afraid, because when you're afraid, you need to get more. That's why there's no such thing as good news channels. It doesn't sell. It doesn't get the ratings, because you're not really interested as much as in bad news, believe it or not. Yes.
Can I just ask you what your thoughts are about the link between sugar and anxiety? You said avoid sugar.
Yes. Sugar is probably the most significant addition to our diet that's thrown our chemical balance totally off kilter. We are today imbibing 3,800 times the sugar that we did 150 years ago. 3,800 times the amount of sugar. And sugar is now implicated in nearly every single aspect of illness, not least among which is cancer. One of my granddaughters is doing her PhD in cancer research, and they grow all cancers in what? Sugar. So sugar is, in fact, one of the biggest problems that we have. It affects our metabolism a tremendous amount. Perhaps even much more so than some of the other popular things that we're talking about. And there's a whole debate about fats, a different kind of fats, and that's swinging backwards and forwards every decade. But sugar, I think there's quite unanimity about it being the singular, most hurtful drug that we are imbibing. And the hidden sugar that we aren't using for coffee and tea is much, much more than the 3 teaspoons that we put, or 2 teaspoons in coffee and tea. We get about 20 to 30 just from the average supermarket eating every day or the fast food eating. Noise. We know that as you get older, you become more sensitive to noise. But noise itself is an irritant, and often you find yourself in noisy circumstances. And it's sometimes a very, very easy thing to put earplugs in and avoid that. Noise can become very much a background irritant that allows your body to start to become stimulated to the point that it becomes more open to the kind of worry catalysts that you find in your life. So there are other aspects. And then there are positive things to do. So far we've been talking about remedies and avoidance. What about the positive things you can do? Like put yourself into a relaxed state. And we'll practice that, of course, the relaxation response through breath work, which we've spoken about. Exercise is one of the most wonderful mechanisms of bringing the metabolism of the body back to its normal state. It's certainly a wonderful way of being able to neutralize a lot of worry, anxiousness. We're not talking about getting rid of it, because a lot of worry and anxiousness comes from situational, circumstantial, and real life matters that you have to deal with. That's called problem solving, and you have to set aside time for problem solving. We're not talking about problem solving here. We're not running away from realities of life. What we're talking about is fretting about those problems because you're not dealing with the solutions right now. Why? Because there's no time this very moment, and this is an inappropriate setting, and whatever might be the reason. Right now you're taking care of children or grandchildren. Right now you're involved in your workplace, etc. And yet the thoughts and feelings begin to assail you, and you start to become upset as a consequence of that. So we need to utilize alternative approaches, the relaxation response or the exercise response. Yes, there is a chemical result from exercising. The endorphins flow more readily, and the serotonin of the brain therefore is released better, and as a consequence these are the happy drugs that you create within your body and are able to neutralize, counteract some of the negative ones. Yeah, it's equally artificial, perhaps you might say, because exercise is something you have to do to change your body state, but then it's that much more pleasant to be in a happier state than an unhappy state. So why not? Again, it doesn't solve the problem, but it does relieve the symptoms of worry and anxiety. And then there's meditation. Meditation is a variation on the relaxation response or breathing technique. Meditation has many other foci. You're taking your mind away from that which has caused the anxiousness and allowing your consciousness of the mind to be elsewhere. And as you move your mind away, the feelings have to move away. Feelings follow the mind. Feelings follow the mind. That's why meditation will work. Okay, on the basis of what we've been talking about, are there any questions or thoughts at the moment?
Dr. Herbert Benson's approach is exactly what?
That's not. Dr. Herbert Benson was a researcher in the 80s who examined the relationship of focusing on rhythmic activity, not hypnosis, but rhythmic activity, in order to be able to relax the body. And he found that the most rhythmic activity that the human being consciously can alter and change is breath. If I were to ask you to change your heartbeat, it would be very difficult. not impossible. You can be trained to change your heartbeat. You can be trained to change many things about your body as such. But basically, we can't do it as a matter of will. Breath we can change as a matter of will. I can ask you to breathe quickly, and I can ask you to breathe slowly. I can ask you to breathe shallowly. I can ask you to breathe deeply. And breath is rhythmic. It's in and out, in and out. And when you examine and focus on a rhythm, it takes your mind very easily away from other mind thoughts, and therefore changes your emotions. So he found that if we can change our breathing in certain ways, he was able to hook people up to read different parts of the body while they were involved in specific ways of breathing, and found that there was significant change that correlated with a person feeling much more at ease and feeling much more relaxed. Mainly called in the literature abdominal breathing. All right, so anyone here is ready to walk away from this table and not feel worried? Have I sort of convinced you so quickly? Or am I really reading a lot of skepticism there, coupled with politeness? What do you think?
I feel like fear is very much in the world and runs the world. Actually, lots are motivated by fear. And
Fear is rampant in the world.
So some of these things feel like a bit like putting the finger in the dark. It's really not get into it.
Okay. So let me talk about both of these comments. In Jewish teachings, each one of us is described as an olam katan, which literally translates as a small world or a microcosm of the world, which means that each one of us has all the features of the total world itself and of the cosmos as a whole. Another way to extrapolate from that is that you create your own world. You may be living in the big world, but you also are a world intact with all the capacities to create the kind of climate changes that you wish within your own world. So although the world, when we read out there, doesn't seem to be like a very pleasant place in many respects, you in your own world can nevertheless create pleasantness. You have the ability to be able to create your own ambience for yourself. You don't have to plug in to the bigger world. So please don't allow the bad news syndrome to get to you and affect your inner world. Rose, what were you saying?
I said that these options that you gave us seem like small, like just putting the finger in the dark to stop the flow.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And yet it's not. If I tell you that with the flick of one internal switch, you can remove worry and anxiousness just like that, that won't be just putting a finger in the hole in the dike as such. And what is that switch that I'm talking about? Change your thought. It's as simple as that. Change your thought, which we're going to practice in a moment.
Because there is those laws of attraction as well. If you're in a fearful state, then you tend to attract more fear. Like back into that traffic jam, you're trying to get to that appointment. If you're stressed and, all worked up about it, you tend to attract worse traffic. Always somebody will come in front of you.
So if I remember correctly, the phrase, the laws of attraction, was made very, very popular by a book called The Secret. All right? And The Secret was certainly no secret. It was a very wonderful and wonderfully smooth PR exercise, okay? And it became a simplistic notion of laws of attraction. It doesn't work very, very easily at all. In other words, if I want tomorrow Tatzlotto to be attracted to me, no matter how much I wish it and want it tonight, it's still probabilistically unlikely that it will happen. So laws of attraction just don't work like that, okay? So why do we put a mezuzah on a doorpost? And the reason is because we create around us a certain protective energy by putting that mezuzah on the doorpost. So whenever we walk out of the house or into the house, we have that particular energy as such. So a lot of people ask me the question, should I be scared of the evil eye? Or it's called ayin hara. Or to put it in more contemporary terms, someone thinks badly about me. Will that affect me? And the like. And the short answer is absolutely not. On the other hand, if you believe it, it's very likely that it'll happen because your whole behavioral posture and your whole response mechanism is going to be based on fear, and therefore it's going to actually create problems for yourself. No, you don't attract things into your life if you don't want them to come into your life. You have a nice little shield around you.
It feels like we are afraid of bad things happening, and it seems like things happen in our lives that we to find some peace, and to me it's something about faith in God that whatever happens is for our highest good, even if it seems like it's a bad experience. So so that we have, it's a deeper faith, I think.
True.
And then prayer, and then being able to offer it.
True. But that's already at the stage of test. We're talking here about, let's not get to the point where the bad thing has to happen to us for us to work really hard to recognize that it's a good thing. Let's not let the bad thing happen in the first place. And the way to do that is to be able to think positive and to be able to respond positively to circumstances, because positive radiation of yourself, following your discussion before, changes the world around you as such. I'm not denying anything you've said. In fact, what you said is very, very valid itself. But I think that if you're able to turn off worry, turn off anxiousness, it's very likely that your response mechanism to people and to life is going to be quite different. And therefore your life will be very different, much better. Yeah, yes. Of course, the word energy is also a very much overused metaphor. We don't necessarily mean energy as in physics, nor do we necessarily mean energy as in our capacity to exercise all day, but we do have this implicit, intuitive sense that we radiate something. And Judaism does testify to that. As I've said to you on a number of occasions, what the Frierdiker Rebbe notes, for example, you can project a thought to someone on the other side of the globe, a positive thought, and with your positive thought affect them spiritually and physically, tangibly, etc. So there's something real. We don't stop at the surface of our skin. We radiate beyond there. Call it an energy, if you will, whatever it might be. But positivity creates positivity.
It's a little bit like being your own alchemist.
If you like that idea, by all means, yes, we are our own alchemist. Or simply, there's a notion that Hashem created the world with goodness, and therefore, as a consequence of that, goodness is the dominant feature of life. And if we can ride the crest of that wave, we're very much likely going to have success.
So, are some people actually born without that fear?
Yeah, we are all very individualistic. Look,
So it's an emotion that the human being is born with?
Genes, environment, and home modeling are the three most powerful factors that shape us, okay? And for those people who don't have a sense of strength of character, strength of will, and practice, will become simply like a leaf that's driven by the wind. And you'll become whatever your genes tell you to be and what your environment tells you to be and what your home modeling has put into you as such. But because you are a human being with independent personality and independent potential, you can alter any of those three as you choose. But you have to exercise choice and practice it.
But there is a lot of people actually work on high-rise buildings, exposed to the elements, without fear of falling over.
Yeah.
A normal human being will stand over there, and the first thing is going to come to them are these dogs.
Sure.
And these people walking around as if there was like a normal everyday.
We do have different natures, and we are born with different inbuilt waves that well up within us and overtake us. That's our very differences. And we do
They
have
have no fear. They were never born with an emotion. Or
I
they
guess.
have no sense of fear.
fear is. Remember what I said earlier. All emotions stem from the mind. So ultimately, whatever we have a fear of, that's how psychiatrists are able to deal with phobias. It's not that they somehow use some emotional alchemy in order to deal with it, but they use very, very logical processes. If you have fear of spiders, they'll eventually get you to become closer and closer to a spider until such point that you actually can touch the spider and hold the spider, because your mind then tells the emotion there's nothing to be afraid of.
Surely it's nothing to be afraid of because there's no danger. Okay? But standing on the
Good.
6th floor,
Yes.
all exposed, and you're walking on those rails.
So what must you conclude then? That their interpretation of their circumstance is a little different than yours.
How can it be? I mean,
Well, but don't ask how it can be, because it is. That's why they're up there.
And they don't think that they're going to fall.
how can you not? I mean, it's just a logical thing. You're standing there.
Gabriel. But they do it, don't they? So what are we going to
They
say?
do it.
So
I cannot
what
figure out how can a
would
normal
you
human
what
being-
would you conclude from that? That they do it.
They're not normal.
It's a danger when I'm the only normal one. Be careful.
There's something else to be considered in your supposition, and that is that a couple who started off working on a one-story place, that then they started building 3, 4, 5-story places.
Fine.
So that person, his brain chemistry that you were talking about before, has adapted to now working on a 30.
But you're still risking your life.
You're right, but the point being,
He's more used to it.
and you're both probably quite correct. You've got two Gabriels talking to each other, don't we? Yeah. Okay, that's really good. And they're still talking, which is great. But the point that I want to raise in this session is not to be afraid of walking on the 60th floor of a construction site on a girder, because it's very unlikely that anyone in this room will find themselves in that circumstance.
So no
But
matter
I
what
do,
else
but
that
I
goes
do want us to deal with normative, everyday worries and concerns, and the kind of things that unfortunately affect our lives so adversely, even though they're ordinary. Okay?
But I think it does connect, because
Yes.
it's a little bit like going and do a wall climbing, if anyone here did it. At the beginning, all your body is like this, and at the second time it's a little less, and the third time less. And then you reach to the top and it's like, oh, it's not that bad. So you practice that, and it's all about practicing. So I guess when things happen to us in real life, once we bring the awareness there and we notice it happening, this is our opportunity to actually practice those things here and now. And
So it's basically you teach yourself, you get used to it, like you said, right? So
Yeah.
it's not something that you can actually pass it on to someone else.
What he's saying is that as you get older and miss more doctor's appointments, you start to realise it's no tragedy whatsoever.
Actually,
Okay?
if I miss a doctor's appointment, I'll just say, you know what, I'm not feel sick anymore.
Okay. Positive disposition, the capacity to tune out, using your mind to interpret differently. These are the elements that we want to talk about. So why don't we do a little meditative exercise that will begin to set us on that track. So put your pens down, put your feet symmetrically on the ground, hands resting on knees and thighs, back fairly straight, head resting well on your shoulders in a balanced manner. Allow your shoulders to slump just a little. The back of your neck, relax. And gently close your eyes. And just focus on your breath. Gently breathing in and gently breathing out, quite normally. Just be aware of the air entering and the air exiting. And if you can, prefer to breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. And become aware of the coolness of the air as it enters the nasal passages, compared to the relative warmth of the air as it exits from the nose. Cool air entering, warm air exiting. And just experience in your nose that temperature difference. Slow down the breathing and deepen it, allowing that temperature difference to become more pronounced. And as you breathe in through the nose, direct the air down into your abdomen, seemingly into your belly. And the way to do that is, as you breathe in, expand your abdomen to collect the air, and to breathe out, contract the abdomen to expel the air. So the abdomen acts like a pump. So take a slow, deep breath in, expanding your abdomen, your chest fairly still, and then contract the abdomen to force the air out, and the chest still fairly still. This is a little counterintuitive, so you have to practice it. Breathe in deeply, expanding your abdomen to collect the air at the same time, and then pull your abdomen in to expel the air. And just continue like that for several breaths. Deep, slow breath in, diaphragm out, pull it in, breathe out. Allow the breathing to be rhythmic, so we'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and breathe out for a count of 4. So take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And just continue breathing in and out rhythmically, abdominally, smoothly and gracefully. Mode Ani. I thank you, Hashem. Mode Ani. I acknowledge you. Mode Ani. I submit my will to your will. Mode Ani. I thank you, Hashem, for bringing back my personality, my individuality, back into the world this day. Mode Ani. I acknowledge that even should there be challenges, pain, I will nevertheless recognize that these are potential growth opportunities for me to grow through and to enlarge myself. Mode Ani. I will abnegate my ego. I will allow my vision to be wider by looking beyond myself, recognizing that there is a pattern, that there is goodness, and that I can effect it. Mode Ani. I thank you, Hashem, for providing me this day with this unique opportunity to make my personal contribution to life and to the life of individuals around me. Continue breathing deeply, slowly, abdominally, rhythmically. And make a commitment to yourself that tomorrow morning you'll wake up and affirm the message of Mode Ani, diminishing your fear quotient during the day, allowing yourself to opt for faith and positivity in the face of whatever pressures and opportunities that might arise in the course of that day. Become aware again of the air entering the nose and exiting from the nose. Begin moving your fingers and your toes here in the room. Move your fingers, move your toes. And when you feel ready, open your eyes, coming all the way back into the room. If you practice something like this every day, the result will be that you'll be able to capture a small amount of it whenever you need to. Meaning, we took a full 10 minutes, but you'll be able to do this in a space of 30 seconds, even 15 seconds, and creating that break from the stress cycle, from the worry cycle. And that relief will alter and change the intensity of the worry and of your concern. And as you do this progressively over and over again, it'll become much more balanced, affording you an opportunity subsequently to reframe in a positive way, which today wasn't the purpose of the exercise. So the purpose of today's exercise was to create that emptiness that allows you for the opportunity to break out of that emotional cycle which you may be in at any time when anxiousness, worry, stress overtakes you. Traditionally, we Jewish people have practiced this every morning, this affirmation. And waking up, the first posture that we adopt becomes a very telling effect on the whole day. Because as you move from the subconsciousness of sleep to the consciousness of the waking moment, you actually incline the whole mannerism of the day intellectually and emotionally. So if you adopt this as the first conscious posture, you actually create an effect of it throughout the course of the day.
You mentioned that you believe fear underlies a lot of anxiety. What happens if you can't readily identify the nature of your fears?
Which is often the case. Then you need someone to help you identify it. It's very often the case that we are unable to do it alone. That's where a counselor, a specialist, a friend, doesn't have to be a specialist, two heads are better than one in such circumstances.
How can you not identify your fears?
How can you not?
Yeah.
Because we can feel anxious and worried, and the truth of the matter is what we're afraid of isn't really what we're afraid of. There's a much deeper fear gnawing at us that presents itself as a rather something superficial. I'm talking very abstractly.
So you got this emotion without base.
There are a lot of people who wake up in the morning feeling anxious for absolutely no reason whatsoever. They feel in their chest anxiousness, and it hasn't been the result of a dream that they know of. It hasn't been the result of any circumstance. It has been caused by something perhaps in the past, but they don't see the relationship to it. And therefore, the normative treatment for that is to give them something which will counter that, because it becomes a habit. The body habitually produces the anxiety despite your best intentions. And very often it's best to deal with it in a manner that isn't consciously fighting it, but is able to change it in a subliminal way.
I didn't understand what you meant about the breathing in the morning. Is that what you advise to do when you wake up, to do that breathing?
That breathing you can do most any time in the day you want. Not at all just specifically in the morning. You certainly can, but the little breathing aspect of that exercise is a very good interlude to introduce any time that you have any anxiousness or worry. The Bodha Ani part of the exercise. Just quickly 7 and 8. The Kabbalah of anxiety, which we started off with. That's the left side that we said, as opposed to the right side. I deliberately opened my discussion with that because I thought it much better placed in the beginning of the class. So I'm not going to spend too much time, but 8 I want to spend 3 or 4 minutes at least on now by way of conclusion, and pick it up perhaps in the next session. Reframing, which a word that I've used throughout. Reframing means reinterpreting. It means you might have a beautiful Mona Lisa in your house because you've paid a fortune for it, but nevertheless you put a really bad choice of frame on it, and every time that you look at it, the painting doesn't look as good as it should. That's the same with life. very often we put a bad frame on the circumstance, and that affects us adversely, and we start to see it bad when it's not really bad at all. Life is generally good. It's we who've put a negative frame on it. Remember what I said earlier in that meditation, that you need to be able to recognize that challenges are not bad. Even pain sometimes, God forbid, don't want to wish it on anybody, is not necessarily bad. In a meditation exercise some people did with me this morning, we actually worked through the process of pain so that we actually are staying with the pain. And at the end of the exercise, they didn't feel the pain anywhere near as acutely as such. So there's ways of doing that. Reframing is reinterpreting. Someone is yelling and screaming at you. Instead of the usual egocentric response, which is, how dare you speak to me like that? How dare you yell at me? What chutzpah? Reframe. They're yelling and screaming at you. They have a problem. Help them. Don't become like them. Help them. Reframing is reinterpreting. And that means getting rid of the ego. The ego will say, how dare you speak to me like that? And your compassionate self will do the opposite and say, this is a great opportunity for me to assist them. Reframe. Okay. Lastly, the emunah bitachon. Emunah bitachon is faith and trust. I'm not going to define the terms, but I'm going to say this to you. It's very, very likely that the pain that you're experiencing is likely to be a source of an illness for which you'll have no capacity for healing, with an end result that's horrible. A lot of people talk to themselves like that. Or it's very, very likely that that pain that I'm experiencing is momentary, it's inconsequential, and tomorrow I won't even remember it. We aren't prophets. We can't predict the next moment. Therefore, those people who are doomsday prophets, this pain is going to be a symptom of something horrific, are playing prophet without the abilities of being a prophet. That is silly. On the other hand, you know as well as I do, the most pains in the body, by and large, don't have any incriminating features for the future. So whenever you have an adversity in life, the first response mechanism must be tracht gut und wird sein gut. Think positive and the outcome will be positive. If it should become, later on, perceived as a real issue, then you'll deal with it in a different reframing way of being able to deal with it positively. But by and large, your first response mechanism with everything in life is arbitrarily choose to believe that it's good. There's no less logic than arbitrarily choosing to think bad. No less logic. There's a 50-50 percentile probability either way. Therefore, if it's got 50-50, why choose the negative when you can equally logically choose the positive? There's equal logic in that. Of course, it goes beyond that. By choosing the positive, you actually effect healing. You lessen the fear, so the pain quotient will be less, and all the things that we said at the beginning of the class. Okay, we'll pick it up. Yes?
The last one feels.
The left side. That's what I said, the Sphirot on the left side.
All three?
Yes, of course. It begins with mind, Bina, has to move to emotion, Kabbalah, and has to express through heart in real life.
All three.
Yeah, sure. It's sequential.
If you start your day with gratitude, that helps to move in that direction.
Exactly right. That's what we were doing before the modernity. The more contemporary way of talking about it is to talk in terms of gratitude. The word modeh derives etymologically from the word todah, which means thank you. And what happens when we're saying thank you to somebody? What is thank you? Thank you means my focus is on you and not on me. So my relationship is you're the center of gravity, not me. That means humility. And when you practice humility, you have the capacity to really practice gratitude. You can't practice gratitude in a state of ego and in a state of pride. You have to have humility as a prelude to it. That's what we do with Modani, create the ego abnegation so we can really say thank you.
Maybe that's why ta doesn't count.
Which doesn't count?
Ta.
Ta.
You don't really express not the thank and not the you.
I still prefer a ta than a punch in the nose. Okay. Good evening.
So what were you saying about the
No, we were talking about today left side and right side. Bina, Gevura, Hod. That is more the aspect of this, which is the source of worry, anxiousness, and stress, as opposed to Chochmah, Chesed, Netzach, which is more that, which is the outward flow. Have a lovely evening.